Welcome to the Veterans Cafe podcast, where we talk about issues surrounding veterans and soldiers, as well as current events in the world. We're your hosts, Wes
and Tracy.
Welcome to the Veterans Cafe podcast. We've really been looking forward to putting this episode out. Today, we actually had the honor and privilege of interviewing a special guest. Her newest book was a unique perspective on how the war is affecting soldiers and families. So without further ado, here's our interview with Jennifer Miller. Okay, so we have today with us Jennifer Miller, who is a teacher at Columbia University. She has a number of articles written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Christian Science Monitor, the Daily Beast, and many others. She's also an author of 3 books, and the one we're going to be talking about today is The Heart You Carry Home. Thanks for being with us today on the Vets Cafe, Jennifer.
Well, thanks so much for having me on.
We're very excited. We've been looking forward to this.
Me too.
So if you don't mind just starting out, just tell us a little bit about the book, just a short synopsis on what we can expect reading it.
Sure, of course. So The Heart You Carry Home features a young woman, Becca Keller, whose father is a Vietnam vet and whose husband has just come back from Iraq from his second tour. And he comes home suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And the two of them have an altercation, which causes Becca to essentially flee her home. And the only person that she has to go to at that time is her dad, who she's kind of estranged from. And she ends up joining him and a bunch of his Vietnam vet biker buddies on a cross-country motorcycle trip to see an old commander of his who kind of oversees this compound in the Utah desert for suffering vets. But some dark things are happening out there. But in any case, as Becca is on the road with her father and friends, she's really learning about whether or not she can go back to her husband. And meanwhile, her husband really wants her back, so he's trying to track her down. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the story.
So do you feel like with the story, are you kind of focusing a little bit more on sort of how PTSD impacts, the relatives around soldiers? I understand you're also obviously telling a story about, how soldiers are going through it or veterans are going through it. But, just reading the excerpt that I read, it feels like, we're sort of talking about Becca's own sort of traumatic experience, just being exposed to that type of environment.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So the book is kind of split in terms of the narrator. There are two main narrators. One is Becca, and one is her husband. So you're really getting the perspective of both the soldier coming home as well as his wife, who has been at home while he has been overseas, and the trauma that in a way both of them experience, how that kind of comes in between their relationship. And the title of the book, The Heart You Carry Home, it's very much a metaphor that a lot of soldiers, they're carrying the war home with them, and so the question is, when it comes to the people that you love and that you care so deeply for, what does that heart look like when your loved one returns? And, are you still able to love that person and connect with that person, despite the changes that, he or she may have gone through? And that's really the question that Becca is asking herself. And it's a painful question and a painful process for her to go through.
Yeah, actually, you actually bringing that up and ironically also speaking about metaphors, the part that kind of stuck with me towards the end of the first chapter, you kind of talked about her running coach, right, and how he gave her sort of this method of running long distance races, and how she kind of falls back on it and says, basically in this way you can outrun anything. So obviously it's sort of alluding to outrunning what she's having to deal with in that situation. So I was wondering when I was reading it, do you feel like this is actually something that a lot of people are actually silently dealing with, because it's not something that's really being talked about a whole lot. I mean, there are programs and things like that about family support, but you're not really hearing a whole lot about specifically, what the family members are going through. So do you think that, this is a sort of an issue that we're not really addressing directly?
I think it absolutely is an issue that needs to be brought more to the forefront. I mean, the military, as you know, has made many strides over the generations to really try to support soldiers coming back with their mental issues, not just their physical issues. But it's even been, very recently that, more soldiers have felt comfortable really speaking out about the trauma that they've experienced. And there's still a stigma that many people feel in the military. And so, the families, when you have that situation, the families tend to get left behind a little bit. The struggle, the emotional and psychological struggles that they're dealing with, it's like you can't even begin to address that until you've been able to start, really taking care of our vets' mental health. And so the families, they're kind of on the back burner in a way. And one of the reasons that I wrote this novel is that I really wanted to highlight the position of the families and to show how much of a struggle it is to have a loved one away at war, and then when the war is over, to have that same loved one back home, and that it's not easy. There's not a simple fix to it. But I've been thinking a lot about, especially, so we just had Veterans Day, and what does it mean to support the troops? And I think that in a lot of ways, supporting the troops means supporting the families and providing resources for families to, be prepared for, what their loved ones may be experiencing, and to help them support the people that they love.
I think, in my opinion, a slightly, I don't want to say unique, because I'm certainly not the only female soldier that's married to another soldier. So I'm certainly not unique in any way. But it's interesting because the most recent deployment that my husband went on, I became friends with the wives of like the husbands, of like the group that was attached with or deployed with my husband in the detachment. And I felt this like disconnects somewhat. I mean, we shared the fact that our husbands were gone, right? And, we were dealing with our own kind of issues. Like, one of the wives had like plumbing problems, and like, bless her heart, she didn't know what to do, so we were like, oh my God, call a plumber. I mean, it was like silly and funny and things like that now. But at the time, she was like really upset. And of course, she wasn't in a position where she could reach out to her husband. And then, of course, there were more serious issues. There was like infants that were home with their mother, and the infant was sick, and they weren't worried. They weren't sure if they wanted to tell the husband because he's deployed and things like that. And I don't know, one of the reasons I really like this story is because I can kind of identify with a couple of different characters, I think. And I mean, I know it's really early on, but I was really excited because I think one of the ways you're going to understand anybody is to try to like step in their shoes. And I think a lot of the females that were married to this group that I was talking about, I think that they always felt like I didn't understand. And I was just like, well, of course I understand. So I don't know. I just think it's a very interesting topic. And I'm really excited to have you here. And I want to get more information about the story and I want to find out what happens.
Absolutely. I mean, what's interesting, it's interesting that you kind of bring up that disconnect because, I've talked to people who, have been in those support groups and, many people find them extremely helpful. There was an earlier draft of the novel, actually, where Becca went to one of those support groups, and she personally didn't feel like she could connect with the other women. I think in part because as a character, she's really, in a lot of ways, she's really a loner. I mean, she didn't even, it took her a long time to even let Ben, her husband, in, like when they first started dating. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that she had a tumultuous home life as a kid because her dad who had served in Vietnam, was suffering from PTSD, and I think that created there was a psychological reverberation for her that made it difficult for her as she grew up to connect with other people. And so a lot of this book is really about her learning to kind of open up her heart to the other people in her life, and a lot of that is actually becoming very close with her father's friends, who also served in Vietnam, and kind of learning about what their experience was like as a way to better understand her own dad and her husband.
I love the ideas and I love the just the different messages, and I love the characters a lot so far. I think I think you've hit on a lot of topics that I think are definitely worth discussing. And I think from my perspective, unfortunately, I know soldiers just this past calendar year that have been facing PTSD, and a couple of them have not made it. They've ended up taking their own lives. And from my point of view, one of them is in my unit, and it's really shocking when you find out about it, because as a soldier, we go through a lot of training, what to look for and what to say. And when you find out that someone tries to do something like that, it just kind of shakes you to your core. And I think certainly he was in a position where he was feeling the stigma that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. And it's true that, this is really a problem that that we're facing as a country, and that the military is facing. And one of the things that I talk about in The Heart You Carry Home is there's a thread running through the book that deals with the Iliad by Homer, and about the Trojan War, and a lot of it has to do with the way in which Greek soldiers supported one another, and the environment of fighting in a war, many thousands of years ago in that culture, that in fact there was actually much more support for the emotional fallout back then, and in that ancient Greek warrior culture than there is now. And I did a lot of research reading about that, and it's just really interesting to kind of see how, and psychologists who study this stuff have shown that when you're on the battlefield, you actually are able to process what you're going through, while you're out there, as opposed to just bottling it all up and waiting until you come home. That in fact, it's a healthier way to actually kind of work through a lot of, the very serious events and experiences, that soldiers are going through. So that's definitely a part of the book as well.
Well, allow me to confirm what the psychologists are telling you, because that is definitely where the bond comes from that everybody always talks about. When you're out there, that guy next to you, you can literally talk to them about anything, and it does change everything. And of course,
or girl,
sorry,
or girl,
sorry. But, and of course, as you're building that bond with that person over there in such an extreme environment, you're, separated from that same bond that you would have with your family and relatives. So it kind of makes sense. Although it does seem strange that, like what you were talking about, how in the past, it was like the Greek culture was much more open and they were able to deal with these things. And now here we are in a modern age, and we can't even, talk about our problems anymore. So, and honestly speaking of all this, when you see these types of situations, a lot of people, when they hear about PTSD, or they see something about soldiers and what they go through or what their relatives go through, it's always on some TV show or some horrible movie or something, and it's always like way over dramatized, and it's, of course, all the issues fit some plot of some love triangle that doesn't make sense. It's it's nonsensical. And so my question is, when I'm reading your book, I sense a sense of authenticity, as in, I hope I'm not getting too personal, but just that you may have had some kind of experience, or at least you've done a lot of research with people that have. So is there, I don't want to be too personal or anything, but if there's any way you could elaborate on that, I'd love to hear, how it is that you actually got into this in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, I'm I very much appreciate it, and I'm happy that, it feels authentic to you. I mean, I work, very hard to try to communicate authentic experience. So actually, what initially motivated this book was a reporting trip that I went on about 10 years ago for the New York Times. You guys, I must be familiar with Rolling Thunder, the national organization of motorcycle riding vets. They advocate for veterans' rights and for POWs and MIAs. Many of them, I think the majority of them served during the Vietnam era. And so about 10 years ago, I got very interested in them. I was very curious. I'd always been, kind of intimidated by bikers. I had never been on a motorcycle before. And so I, set out to interview them. And I was invited by a group of about 20 of them to travel across the country from California to D.C., to be in D.C. on Memorial Day in time to visit the wall, the Vietnam Memorial Wall.
Right.
That's such a wonderful place.
It is. And I grew up in D.C., so, that landmark was very familiar to me, and I had kind of always seen these bikers from afar when my family and I would go down there on Memorial Day. But to actually travel with these guys, and it was mostly men, to travel with these men for 2 weeks and to really immerse myself in their world was really a monumental and life-changing experience for me. In a way, I was kind of embedded with them. I was riding on the back of a couple of their motorcycles.
How fun!
Yeah, it was fun. It was also extremely challenging, because I was the only woman, I was 25 at the time, never been on a bike.
And it's impossible to keep your hair looking cute. It's just not going to happen. It was so fascinating because, I think, bikers get a bad rap a lot of the time. We've seen in recent years, news stories highlighting, violent activities of bikers. And, these guys are very complicated, but I have to say they were gentlemen through and through. I mean, they made sure that I wore my sunblock every day. They took me to one of the Harley Davidson outfitters and helped me buy this accessory. I had a long ponytail at the time, and it's this leather accessory that you wrap your ponytail in to make sure that your hair doesn't tangle, because of course they all have ponytails now and long beards. And as I was traveling with them, I just talked to them and I listened to them, and they told me about their experiences, serving in Southeast Asia. They told me about their experiences coming home. And for many of them were suffering from post-traumatic stress, from alcoholism, drug addiction. They were, a lot of them had been suffering and were now sober, but we're still, really dealing with this event that happened 40 years ago that has, defined their lives. And just to be kind of with them and observing them and listening to them started me on this journey toward writing The Heart You Carry Home, but also gave me a lot of firsthand, knowledge and experience of what these guys were going through, just kind of the intimate experience that I had with them.
It's funny, actually, because my parents, they're actually, obviously by no means are they like Hell's Angels or anything, but they love to like ride Harleys and all that. And they actually, I believe at some point got involved with the, I forget what they call themselves, like the Freedom Riders or something like that, they go to the funerals and everything like that. So it's been kind of neat to actually, see my parents involved with stuff like that. And, but I have to ask, were you married at the time? Because I imagine your husband was like, wait, they're soldiers and bike? No, this is not happening.
So I was not married at the time. I actually was in a long-term relationship at the time. And my boyfriend didn't really mind. It was really my parents who were a little more concerned that I was, flying clear across the country to, spend 2 weeks on a motorcycle with a bunch of strange men. But I was nervous. I did I did persuade a friend of mine who he's a photographer, and I knew there was going to be just amazing photographic opportunities. So I persuaded him to come along. So I did have, and I was joking in the beginning, like, okay, well, you can be my backup, you can be like my my bodyguard, but as I said, I mean, these guys, the men that I was with were just really, I mean, they, in a way, they kind of took me under their wing, like I was their granddaughter, kind of. So,
I love that.
which is lovely. Which is not to say that they didn't, give me, a hard time. They're very opinionated, and
that's definitely like a military way. That's a military personality.
That's basically how we jump you into the group. Just kind of beat you up verbally, and then and then you're in.
But then bend over backwards to do anything you need to make you comfortable and happy, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a steep learning curve, but then once I kind of got in it, I was just. It was so different than anything that I had experienced previously. And then after that trip, so I didn't jump into the novel immediately after that trip. I actually, after that trip, decided that I wanted to do more reporting about veterans coming home and mental illness. So I actually I did a series of articles for the Christian Science Monitor about those topics. So one of the stories I did looked at, I went to the VA out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which at the time had just started a program. They have a lot of Native American vets, and so they had just started a program where they were integrating Native American traditional healing techniques and ceremonies into the PTSD therapy. Like they'd actually built a sweat lodge on the VA campus. So I did a story about that, and then I did another story, which again you see reflected in The Heart You Carry Home, about relationships between Iraq and Afghanistan vets coming home and Vietnam vets. So how the older generation of vets in some cases have taken the younger vets under their wing and have become mentors and helped them navigate the VA and all of the bureaucracy, and also just provided, emotional support.
Absolutely. Aside from, advancements in medicine and psychology and things like that, I mean, I feel as a veteran myself, I definitely have to give credit to all the Vietnam guys and the World War II guys, because if they hadn't gone through of course, the horrible circumstances that they went through, not in the war, but actually coming home, then we wouldn't have, today what we have as far as the support and the ability to be able to reach out to people like that. So personally, I feel like my generation owes a lot to the previous generations in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because so in the book you've got Ben, who has just come back from his second tour in Iraq, and he's suffering, and he for a short time joins up with one of the Vietnam vets who has kind of taken it upon himself to help Ben, to try to help Ben get sober and to get him back on the right track. But of course, Ben has not asked for help, so he's not, he's a little bit resistant to it. And so, for him in the novel, there's also this process of, coming to see how much of a similarity there really is between the experience that he has gone through and the experience that his parents' generation went through in the war. And really, for him, learning to accept help, which was not easy. Is not easy for him to do when the novel opens. And I think that's another message that I really am trying to communicate through the book, which is the importance of opening lines of communication and actually being able to ask for help and to accept help when it's offered, because I think especially in the military community, and this goes for families as well as the soldiers, people are very stalwart. They're very solid. They want to take care of everything themselves. They don't want to have to lean on somebody else. And that's not always, it's not always possible. Healing often begins like when we can recognize that, there are people who want to kind of provide that base for us to lean on when we need it.
No, that's an excellent point. I mean, I know, I was just saying that's an excellent point because, I mentioned a few individuals that I, unfortunately know who have been struggling most recently, and there are, I would say for the most part, the friendliest people you've ever seen. One of them in particular, he was just one of those people, second he walks in a room with a huge smile on his face. So we were very shocked. And, that was just his way of coping, of just showing that he's okay. And it was just very disheartening to find out that if we had known, we would have done anything in our power. So I'm really glad that this is a message you're trying to get out there on a higher level.
Yes, absolutely. And, all this, it applies to all the characters. Every character in the novel, in some way, has to learn to open themselves up to receiving help. But at the same time, almost all of them, they kind of don't even realize when the book opens that they're also capable of helping. And so it's kind of that dual process. And so a lot of the character trajectories are how they come to both, learn how to help each other, but also learn how to accept help from each other.
Yeah, and well, so speaking of getting it out there, I actually have to ask you about this because, of course, as soon as we were contacted about you, I, of course, had to start Googling and looking you up and went to your website and saw your incredibly funny video about the book club thing that you're doing. So I have two questions on that. First,
sure.
Although Guinness is a racket, did you make the goal and get into the book? No or yes?
So, wait, I'm sorry. So did I make the goal of 100 book club?
Yeah, right. Wasn't that wasn't that like the record you were, going for or something like that?
Right. Yeah. So I was doing this for my last novel. I was attempting to visit 100 book clubs in a month. And as you can imagine, that's a lot of book clubs.
Yeah.
That's a lot of book clubs a day
for
many consecutive days. I was able to visit 76 book clubs.
Wow.
Not all in person. A lot of them were through Skype. I'm not doing a record for The Heart You Carry Home, but I am signing up book clubs to visit them, to talk to book clubs about this novel, because I think a lot of book clubs don't often have the opportunity to actually have the author, come in and to talk about, the motivation behind the novel and how the novel was created and, where the characters came from and how the plot twists happen. And I just really love talking about that stuff, and I love sharing that stuff with readers. So I urge all of any of your listeners who are in book clubs or who want to put a book club together, get in touch with me, and I would be more than happy to visit your book club even remotely, and can have a great conversation about it. Yeah. Maybe not 100 in a month, though.
No, that was actually my second question. I was wondering, not for the record, but the world record. But I was wondering if you were going to continue to do something similar for this book, because I'm sure there are plenty of people who would definitely be interested in getting involved in that, because who doesn't have questions about a book that they enjoy? Or of course, you have, what was it? I think I saw you had a master's in writing and fiction and everything. So I'm sure that you would love more than anything to pick the brain of an author that you love. So we would definitely love to make sure that we link to whatever link we need to, or email or anything, so that people can get in touch with you and bombard you with questions about the book. So is it just through your website or is there some other place?
Yeah. So if you go to byjennifermiller.com, jennifermiller.com. My contact information is there. You can read the first chapter of the book there, and you can get in touch with me. And we've actually put together a book club packet for clubs that sign up. So you'll get a series of discussion questions to help, to help the discussion go smoothly and to, give readers some like interesting things to think about. We put together a bunch of custom designed recipes that are themed to the book. So, a lot of the book takes place in the South, and it takes place on the road.
I love the South. I love the food in the South, unfortunately, for my waistline.
So we put together, we've got these really nice recipe cards you can share with all the members of the book, and it's actually inspired by the places that my characters go and the foods that they eat. And then the publisher also put together, just kind of as a fun thing, a bunch of temporary tattoos that are also themed to the book. So so any book club that signs up gets all that stuff for free, and in addition, you get me on Skype or Google Hangout for half an hour, 40 minutes, talking, answering any of your questions. I mean, I love connecting with readers in that way. So feel free to reach out by jennifermiller.com, and you can just email me directly.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to do that. That sounds fun. I do have a question.
Sure.
What is it about writing that you like? I view myself as an artist, as a photographer, and I know what I like what draws me to it. I was just curious what draws you to writing, because I think you're an amazing storyteller from the little bit that I've seen and read myself. So I was just curious what draws you into writing.
No, thank you so much for that. I mean, it really is the storytelling. I mean, it's, when the books that I like the best and then the books that I strive to write are books that have really relatable, compelling characters. Not relatable in the sense that you've got to have post-traumatic stress or have been in the military in order to relate to the characters, but the things that Ben and Becca and the Vietnam vets, all the things that they're struggling with, these are questions and struggles that that I think a lot of people have in different avenues of their lives, and my goal is to really suck you in so that you feel like you're there with them, and then to just tell a good story where you want to keep turning the pages. That's and this book I hope does that, because it's the structure of it. It's this road trip where they're traveling from Tennessee to Utah, and as the book progresses, you find out that the things that are happening out in Utah are, things get darker and darker, and it's not a depressing book ultimately, but I'm trying to draw the reader forward by posing these questions that you want to find out what's actually happening out there in the desert. So just really telling those stories, and that's what I love about being a journalist as well, and that's why I was really drawn to that New York Times story that I reported on Rolling Thunder, and the stories that I wrote about Native American vets, and about relationships between Vietnam vets and Iraq War vets. I wanted to tell people stories, and especially the stories of people who don't often have their stories told. I mean, I think especially with the Vietnam vets are so often overlooked and not given a voice. And so it's really an honor and a privilege for me to be able to, in some way, provide that voice for those outsiders in our society, and to bring them in and to share their story, and so that people can get to know them as individuals and not just, some group.
So it sounds like you want to help give a voice.
Absolutely.
Well, we actually, as veterans ourselves, we really appreciate you doing that. It means a lot to us, just as much as it means to us what the Vietnam and World War II veterans have done for us. So we appreciate that a lot, and I'd really love for you to tell us any website, bookstore, anything you can think of where our listeners could buy your book right now.
So you guys can go to Amazon, of course. You can go to Barnes & Noble. You can go to powells.com. You can go to your local independent bookstore. I am a huge fan of independent bookstores, and if you're able to get the book there, order it. Ask them to order it if they don't carry it. Support small local businesses is really important. But you can also get it online, and as I said, I would be more than happy to Skype in with book clubs that want to read The Heart You Carry Home with your book club. So pick it up, give me a shout, and I'll come and meet your group.
Great. I can't thank you enough for being on the show with us and coming to the Vets Cafe and talking to us about your book and everything. Thank you so much, and we'd love to have you back anytime you're ready.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me on. This was great fun, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing for your community, and so I'm just happy to have been able to be a part of it.
Oh, we are too. I mean, we're here because we want to help as many veterans as possible, and obviously your story is giving a voice to veterans who can't for whatever reason, or they're not able to. So once again, thank you, Jennifer. It was amazing to get to talk to you, and I can't wait to read the rest of the book myself.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
Okay, thank you. We'll talk to you again soon.
Great.
All right, well, thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Vets Cafe podcast. We've linked to the books, website, articles, everything that we talked about during the interview with Jennifer. So please check out the show notes and click on the links. Go check her out, read her book. We even linked to an excerpt of the first chapter so you can get a little preview of it before you decide to purchase it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next time.